Now, the debate on whether apartheid was a crime against humanity has sent the country into a difficult but necessary conversation since the State of the Nation address and before, since that interview was aired here on SABC. Now, social media platforms have become a force to be reckoned with, amplifying discussions and also allowing immediacy and interaction, especially with leaders. And that's what happened at the weekend when Mbali Ntuli, a contender for the Democratic Alliance's top job, asked the party's interim leader John Steenhuisen on Twitter whether he thought apartheid was a crime against humanity. Ntuli went on to say what leaders say matters and gives the impression to what her party stands for. And Mbali Ntuli is a candidate for the position of the DA's federal leader, and she joins us now from the SABC studio in Durban. Thanks so much for your time this morning, Mbali, and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first off, why did you challenge the interim leader of the DA, John Steenhuisen, on Twitter?
Well, I think that senior members in our party had already tweeted about the matter and what I think was contrary to the views of the party. And many of us came out against that and obviously saying that we did think apartheid was a crime against humanity. And I thought it was important for the person who is currently leading the party to also firmly say what the party believes about that. I think that it sends the impression out that the vast majority of the party does believe that apartheid was a crime against humanity. And this conversation would not have happened if senior members had not tweeted in a way that gave the impression that we did not believe that as a Democratic Alliance. And I think that tweets by senior leaders have been damaging to the party in the past. And John has said on many occasions that he will put a stop to it and that he will correct and set the facts straight. And this is what I thought was an opportune moment for that to be happening, because people were starting to say that the DA, because of senior leaders who had tweeted something else, seemed to believe that.
So interestingly, some would say that this is a matter that as a political party, you would discuss this within the internal structures and debate it internally. What have you noticed? What has come out of the meetings that the DA has had opportunity to engage issues like apartheid and its aftermath?
Well, firstly, I do not think that this is a debate to be had internally. This is a debate that people should know exactly where you stand. And that's why, when people were starting to tweet something else, it was very confusing to the public. It also shouldn't even be a debate. I mean, I don't think that anybody in this country who has actually seen what history has done to this country believes that apartheid was not a crime against humanity. But I do think that there's a fine line in South African politics where some conversations can be had internally and debated, and certainly there must be space for that, but there are some things that we can't be seen to be equivocating on. And for me, this is one of those issues where we really can't be seen to not be able to publicly take a stand on it.
So if we look at DA policies, and firstly, you were rather scathing about the process of the release of that policy document. Talk to us about that. You also, essentially was saying that Gwen Ngwenya should have perhaps, and the party by extension, had a little more interaction internally on that particular document.
I have been very clear that internally we have raised this matter to say that procedurally it seems not to follow due process and not to be fair to get policies from the media as members in the party. And one of the reasons that I'm running is to say that we need to be fair and we need to take the considerations of our broader structures and members into consideration when we're having these conversations. So I did think that it was improper to receive those policies via the media. But it has been raised internally, and I do think that it's an opinion that many people in the party share.
It's an interesting situation, though, because if you, as one of the leaders in the party, hasn't seen that document, who then was responsible for crafting the policy position of the Democratic Alliance?
There was a steering committee that was tasked with coming up with some of the policy positions. Those would then have come down to structures, and then we would have debated them. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. It went to the media first, and now we are debating them within our structures. I do think it was just an unnecessary way for us to receive the news. But we are now in the process of actually engaging with those and being able to put our views forward as members and as caucuses and constituencies. And I think also because this is the first policy conference the DA has had in a long time, there can be some leeway made for perhaps the processes not being done in a way that one would think would not cause this kind of tension.
Well, is that indicative of some discord or turmoil within the party structures?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that it's more because we've taken a long time in between congresses and policy conferences to really have a format that could speak to the procedures that everybody had agreed on. There's obviously differing views on a number of policies, and that's why this policy conference is going to be so important, because it's going to give everyone in the Democratic Alliance a chance via the representatives that will be there to really have their views put across. But ultimately, of course, a decision will be taken by the Congress in May around various policy decisions that we take. And I think that is very good for the party, because a lot of the differences we've seen amongst senior leaders in the past have been on some of the issues that we need to get clarity on at this policy conference.
So what are you hoping to bring to the Democratic Alliance, because you will be contesting for the top job? What do you believe needs to change within the Democratic Alliance from where it currently is?
Look, internally, I think that we need to have fair processes. I think that we have gotten into a culture of having leaders that are more equal than others. I'd like to be a leader that brings unity around the party, around everything being fair, including particularly our disciplinary processes. I'd like to be a leader that will help to lead the party into getting some clarity on who we are, what we stand for, and how we represent that to South Africans, because how the message is taken out is also equally important, and I think sometimes we haven't always gotten that right. I'd also want to strongly start building good relationships with other political parties, because we're going to need them if we want to realign politics and become the center or the core of a new majority in South Africa to become an alternative government. All of this hinges on us getting a lot of things right within our organization so that we can get South Africans to trust us and to come back to vote for us for those who left, and to inspire new ones in order to be able to fix South Africa. And then, of course, we need to lead with our offer. And that speaks about how good we are in the Western Cape and in other municipalities where we have clean audits, where we are making people's lives better, but also around social cohesion matters. So when these kinds of issues that are uncomfortable come up, that we are a leading party in saying that we understand people's realities and we are not tone deaf to the way that they need to hear or have these conversations. I think that South Africans are looking for leadership. I think that they're looking for a new type of politics. And I think that they're tired of the typical kind of politician. I'm hoping to bring a new brand of how leaders can lead with empathy, kindness, but particularly fairness, because I think that South Africa is not a fair country and nothing works, and it doesn't matter how hard you work as an individual, you can't get to where you want to because our state has failed. And so for me, I will be strong in opposition and making sure that we are still driving issues that matter to people, but also really increasing our footprints in places where the DA hasn't really gotten a hold. And that's particularly in rural places, township places, and those are the places where I have grown strong activist and am deeply rooted in. And I think that the party needs to go that direction if we're going to try and win more votes and inspire new people.
Well, some are saying at this point that the DA seems to be more right-leaning. Would you concur with that sentiment? And is this one of the things that you would potentially want to change within the party?
Well, it's interesting because people say that we're right-leaning, but some people say that we ANC light, which is quite left of center. I think that part of the problem is that we haven't adequately come out with what our offer is and who we are. I don't think that the DA is right-leaning. I think that we have a spectrum of policies that are quite centrist, most of them, particularly where we are in government, that really look to having a form of social welfare and taking care of the most vulnerable people in our society. But I do think we need clarity on a few more matters to really stake our claim in where we stand in South Africa. And I think that that also needs to happen with extreme message discipline and without leaders voicing their own opinions of what things should be done or how things should be done, but rather on us deciding at a policy conference and then all of us going out in unison. At the moment, because we've had such a long period between when we've been able to coalesce and decide where we stand, everybody is sort of saying their opinion on what it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the party's opinion.
And of course, we have the FW de Klerk issue raging, and we started off there, but many people also question the DA's position on the race question. So what's your view on that?
So what is the question? Where does the DA stand on race?
Where does the DA stand, and where do you stand on race as Mbali Ntuli?
Well, I think that we all know that race is a construct, but obviously it's a reality in the way that it's adapted to how the world works at the moment. And I think one of the questions that we must answer at our policy conference is, do we believe that race is still a proxy for disadvantage or not? I don't think that it's up to any leader to say that on behalf of the party, but what I will be advocating for at that policy conference is whether we decide that we use the word race or not, or we use poverty or we use disadvantage, it must be a policy that is fair and talks to the realities of South Africans. And I don't think that there's denying that black, coloured and Indian South Africans in particular are mainly still in the hole that apartheid left them in. But there is obviously an understanding that more and more, because our state has failed, more people are coming into being disadvantaged, and that can't be denied. And I understand also that white people in particular feel like there's no security for them in this country, and that they are afraid for whether their children have the potential of getting jobs. And that is not because of the race question, that's because South Africa just has an economy that's not growing. And what happens is then people get polarized along racial lines. I think that the DA must absolutely have this conversation, and I think that things that need to be considered is what we decide the criteria is for that. So for me, I would look at different things, whether there's a certain amount of income in your family, do you live in a proper dwelling, do you walk 10 kilometers to school? Has nobody in your family ever gone to university? There's many things that we can use to, I think, get to the same ending of really trying to readdress the people that are most vulnerable and dispossessed in this country. But whether or not it's based on race is something that must be decided at the policy conference.
Well, we have to leave it there. Unfortunately, Mbali Ntuli is DA leader candidate for federal leader position on she will be challenging rather the current DA acting leader, John Steenhuisen. And we will be watching this race as well. And no doubt more conversations to be had around it. Let's take a quick break.